following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. Hello, listeners around the world on radio, streaming, and podcast services. This is It's Not Therapy. I'm Leanna Kersner, and I am not a therapist, but I am your source for navigating the madness of mental health using my top 10 sayings for checking in with your best self. This episode, we're continuing our look at why smart people do dumb things. We've previously covered faulty self-talk, and last week we looked at ego with a specific look at male ego. This week, we're going to look at the female-associated phenomenon of imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, the persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own efforts or skills. Now, later in the show, Dr. Wendy Boring-Bray is going to join us to talk about working with successful women with imposter syndrome. But, as usual, first, the primer, the setting the table for the interview. Imposter syndrome can affect anyone, but we usually center women associated with the phenomenon. Dr. Valerie Young coined the term imposter syndrome in the 1970s. She said, "Those of us with imposter feelings have become adept at essentially attributing our success largely to factors outside ourselves. And so, as a result, there's this kind of nagging fear of eventually being found out." Top 10 phrase, healthy goals are based on things you can control. That's part of the reason I repeat that to myself so often. But this is where I feel the need to put a big anti-gaslighting red flag on the entire framing of imposter syndrome. Any of these conditions, the textbook definitions are very, very vague. There's more to it than that. There's a lot of nuance. There are always factors beyond our control influencing how financially or career successful or not successful we are. Hence me saying healthy goals are based on things you can control. It's not a simple lack of confidence when systemic bias is robbing you of due credit for your work. That's very real, and you can't just overcome that or push through that. And you can't think yourself well when it comes to trauma. It's not imposter syndrome when you're in a work environment where people are telling you that you don't deserve your job. This should be common sense, but common sense is neither. Lousy bosses exist. Not nice coworkers also exist. And lousy and not nice are not the words I actually want to use here, but I got to keep this clean for certain places this program runs on, right? Those toxic workplaces are very real. I've worked in them. I've done a previous episode of this show on them. If you're in a workplace that actively encourages you to cover up mistakes, that's probably why you're afraid you're going to be outed as a fraud. Not all doubts are imposter syndrome. But we live in an age where it's not what you know, it's who you know is more true than ever. According to CNBC, 70% of jobs, 70% are never published publicly. And a whopping 80% of jobs are filled through personal and professional connections. That's a breeding ground for imposter syndrome when a full 80% of jobs are out of reach for someone who doesn't know somebody on the inside. That's real. But it gets more imposter syndrome-y than that, right? We talk a lot about social media. But there's also reality TV and these are weird to me. The TV shows about TV shows, shows like Talking Dead, the show after the show that talks about the show. But then there's an entire ecosystem on services like YouTube devoted to crapping on things that other people make. And it's very hard with all this going on to avoid internalizing some totally unfair criticism of either yourself or somebody you see as like you, and that hits an insecurity. I'll use myself as an example. I frequently have people calling me a scammer, a grifter, and a fake therapist, even though I start the show and say throughout the show, it's not therapy and I am not a therapist. In fact, I've never had a job where I wasn't accused of being fake in some way. When I was younger, the go-to claim with practically every job I had, even volunteer jobs, was that I'd slept with someone to get the job. The weird thing was that the people who actually did sleep with someone to get a job were protected by the person they were sleeping with, so people didn't mouth off the same way. At the time, I didn't have the clarity on it. Hindsight has allowed me to laugh at it, but all my career I've worked in male-dominated spaces. Comedy, video games, tech. They're all fields that are not just male-dominated, but they're centered around men and traditional male interests. So it just became a thing of constantly having to prove that I knew what I was talking about and never quite feeling like I achieved that. And this is where people default to assuming that my worst experiences were with men just because it was a male-dominated and centered space. But the worst experiences often weren't with men. It was often other women sandbagging me because they had imposter syndrome and they were threatened. And this is why this is in the Why Smart People Do Stupid Things series. It's especially well known in gaming circles that women in the press get treated like junk by women PR reps at game companies. There were certain names that went around that we all knew favored men, especially badly behaved men, and tortured other women. But what were we supposed to do? If you complain, you're told you're just making excuses and you have to work harder. Oh, no, I'm sure it was something else. Some guy would say, well, I went in fine. It's like, you're missing the point. Of course you went in fine. Anyway, the entire time I was on television, before I got into games journalism, well, I didn't feel like I belonged there either. I constantly felt like I was one false move away from being fired. I wasn't pretty enough. I wasn't thin enough. I didn't work hard enough. It wasn't even possible to be funny enough because, too many people thought that women aren't funny. And of course, and this is not just me, this is common in media. Whenever I voiced that I was struggling, I was told, well, if you don't like it, quit. If it's too hard, quit. Because, there's hundreds, if not thousands of people out there who, at least in theory, will put up with poor treatment to be on TV. And it's because they think that being famous feels good. It doesn't feel good. I think it was Bill Murray that said, if you want to be rich and famous, try being rich first and see how you like it. And red carpets are a uniquely terrifying experience. There's no preparing yourself for how loud, disorienting, and overwhelming the flashes and shouting and seas of people are. But you have to smile and not look utterly terrified. I don't know anyone who actually actively enjoys those things. It's part of the job. You just go to another place. It's one of those times where dissociation is healthy. All that glamour you see on TV, you see elevated by media, all of that is fake. No one in those situations enjoys that part of the process because you're constantly under the microscope. People are constantly waiting for you to slip up, do something embarrassing, make a mistake, or say something that can be taken out of context that turns you into the villain of the week on X, Twitter, whatever it's called. Actors get into acting to act. Comedians get into comedy to make people laugh. We don't do it to be reduced to objects that people are going to insult and pick apart on the internet. And this is when people say, well, you know what you signed up for. But we didn't. We thought photo shoots and red carpets were fun, not soul-destroying horror shows. And for me, at least, I never saw myself ending up as some sort of Mae West-style pinup. I was always the fat, ugly nerd. I got into performing, well, my mother put me in performing because I was painfully shy. She wanted me to come out of my shell, but I liked the character acting. I liked the creation, the choreography, the staging. I was never the main character. Even in my own life, that was my sister, the prettier, more normal, more acceptable, more agreeable one. I was the weird one, the one everyone seemed kind of embarrassed to be related to. Now, I can't prove that invalidation in childhood is the root of a lot of imposter syndrome, but being branded the weird nerd certainly didn't help me navigate having to play a part that was anything but that. My sense of self-concept and the way people were seeing me were completely out of sync, and so it all felt fake and like I was going to be outed and discovered eventually. I think that I survived precisely because I didn't get into media for the attention. I got into media because I wanted to make the stuff I wanted as a kid and teen but didn't get. And that was programs that showed you don't have to be the prettiest or the smartest or the most popular. Weird can work. But I still got caught up in the imposter syndrome trap. And what I didn't understand then, that I do understand now, is that there's no such thing as the prettiest, right? There's really no such thing as the smartest either, because knowledge and skills are so specialized. Nobody can know it all. These things are subjective. And I think that's why the Barbie movie is hitting so hard. You know, even Margot Robbie thought she wasn't the right person to play Barbie. She thought Gal Gadot was the right person to play Barbie. And I think now everybody is going to see Margot Robbie as synonymous with Barbie. That's how it works. This is why Frozen with the Let It Go song was a phenomenon. This is why Taylor Swift is such a thing. And yes, all these things center on pretty blondes. What happens if one is not pretty and blonde? This is why I'm tying this show in with last week's dive into male ego, right? This causes very smart women to do some extremely stupid things. An obsession with outward perfection is the female equivalent of that fragile male ego. Top 10 phrase, perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. If you believe that you have to be perfect to be good enough, you'll never feel like you're good enough. With the It's Not Therapy team, one of the things I try to model is admitting when I'm not at my best, when I've made a mistake, and when I have no idea if something is going to work. That's because I'm continuing to create in the world the things I needed in my past and didn't have. In fact, I still don't have enough of the things that would make me feel a lot more centered and accepted. But, you know, life's a work in progress. Don't wait for perfect. Perfect's a lie, right? Stop trying to be perfect. If anything here inspires a question, this is pretty heavy stuff, but hey, I thought the male ego stuff was pretty heavy stuff too. Nottherapyshow.com, nottherapyshow.com. Email me directly, Leanna@nottherapyshow.com. But join our mailing list on our website, please. Also, Not Therapy Show, @NotTherapyShow on X, Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. We'll be back after this break with Dr. Wendy Boring Bray talking firsthand, treating people with imposter syndrome, treating women with imposter syndrome when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kersner. I'm still not a therapist. And it's time for the interview, my favorite part of the show, because somebody other than me talks. This episode, I've got Wendy Boring Bray, Doctor of Behavioral Health and licensed professional clinical counselor. She's also the founder of Diversified Behavioral Health, and everybody's going, wow, those are some super good credentials. Wendy's here to talk to us about imposter syndrome as part of this series on why smart people do dumb things. Wendy wrote an article on Psychology Today about imposter syndrome and the role of social media. So, Wendy, let's start right at the beginning. What is imposter syndrome?
So imposter syndrome, it's actually the fear that you'll be exposed as an imposter, that basically you're a fake, you're not real, you're not who you say you are or what you can do. So you are afraid that somebody at work or in your home life somewhere will figure out that you're not real. Not that you're not real as a person, but the things that you are doing aren't you. So, for example, you're waiting for the bottom to fall out when you're at work and you have all these reports you have to do and you know how to do them, but you're doubting your ability to be able to do them. Then you feel like an imposter by doing them, because how are you credentialed or certified to do these reports? Who are you to be able to do this? And that's really what we look at as imposter syndrome, or it can also be called imposter phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. It's something that we see at least more overtly or more talked about in women than men, or people who identify as women and men. I thought that wording was interesting because it's the social category, not biology driving it. Am I right there?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
it really is. And I think that when we look at that, I want to go ahead and say that women have been trained through their training on not to, I guess, to always second guess themselves.
Yeah.
Always second guess. Are you doing the right thing? Where men are not trained that way. Men, they're right. What they're doing is right.
Now, some people claim, oh, well, men and women are just inherently different, but we definitely do set standards and they're very, very rigid. And is this where some of it
Mhm.
begins?
It does. It definitely starts when we are younger. And I think it's important to say that not all women are trained this way, not all of them, but I would say that many are. And we are taught to second guess our feelings. How
Mm-hmm.
many times have we been told, oh, it's not that bad?
Right.
So, right there, right, if we feel like it's that bad and we're expressing it's that bad to us, and somebody tells us it's not that bad, then we're wrong and we're starting to wonder, well, why am I feeling this way then? What's wrong with me?
Right. It's not
So, this is
okay to
really,
feel, yeah, it's
it's
not
not.
okay to feel the negative emotions.
No,
Yeah.
it's not okay. And really that's somebody else's issue. It's not our issue, but we definitely learn to take that on.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's why we're seeing that. And we can kind of trace this back to women feeling more anxious,
Okay.
right? Women tend to feel a little bit more anxious towards things. And there's no wonder why, when we have this training behind us of, okay, what am I doing wrong? Am I not doing enough? And we did see a standard where moms started to enter the workforce. They left, going from being a stay-at-home mom to joining the
Mm-hmm.
workforce. And then girls were also supposed to work, take care of a house, make
Mm-hmm.
sure that things, the children were okay, everything was good. And there was this impossible standard of, I
Mm-hmm.
have to do everything. And so our training looks at, what am I doing wrong because I can't do all these things.
Right. It's the speech in the Barbie movie, right? The
Yeah,
big
I
America
haven't
for
seen
everything.
it.
Yeah. Oh, you got to see it. You got to see it. It like that speech went viral, but it
Mhm.
is the impossible standard. Like you said,
It
Barbie is
is.
sort of and the way they turn it on its ear in the movie is wonderful. And I think a really important message because that what you said there of no matter what choice you make, even in terms of whether you put family first or career first, somebody out there, usually on social media, is going to tell you you're doing it wrong.
Hmm.
And the
Hmm.
why is it anyone's business? Well, because we're trained that it is other people's business and we're supposed to
Hmm.
say, oh, thank you, I'll do better, right? That's partially not having people to talk to and not finding out that no, everybody's overworked, everybody's overextended, everybody's spinning too
Hmm.
many plates, juggling too many balls, right? It's the lack of comparisons that we can rely on. Everybody is putting up a front. Am I off
They
there?
really are.
Okay, yeah.
No, no, absolutely. So I see a lot of people, and one of my specialties is working with high performing individuals.
Mhm.
So they are busy. They are
Yeah.
very, very busy. And on the outside, what you would see from this person is I have all my ducks in a row. My life is good. I've got
Mhm.
the car, I've got the house, I've got the bank account. My life is grand.
Mhm.
On the inside, what I am privy to is I don't know how am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? Why am I doing everything wrong? What's happening?
Mhm.
And it's such a contrast compared to what everybody else gets to see.
Right.
Yeah. And so people are modeling their lives off of these people. And the people that I'm seeing, they don't just necessarily start talking to people and say, oh, no, I don't have it all together.
Right.
It's almost like this well known secret. We
Yeah,
just don't talk about it.
I mean, I think one of the things that happens, I say this as a very busy person, you feel those things you always sort of wanted to do, but it was, well, I'll establish myself and then I'll do it. You start feeling it slipping away. You do start feeling like an out of body experience if you're too busy. But
Right.
we've so elevated hustle culture that it's almost like
Absolutely.
it's a treadmill we can't get off now. So
No.
you get one of these high performing people who clearly
Uh-huh.
have a public image, clearly
Hmm.
are because your competitors are snapping at your heels, the person you mentored might take your job, all that. These things are real. How do you make them more comfortable with the uncertainty that will happen with getting more centered?
It is uncomfortable. But the thing that I do is I start a little bit more at the beginning.
Mhm.
And it's a question of what is this bringing to your life? What do you need to satisfy by doing all of these things?
Right.
I'm not saying all the time, I'm saying several times. What it is there is a need to be acknowledged, there is a need of acceptance.
Okay.
It's something that they probably did not receive at an earlier age.
Mhm.
And what they're trying to do is they're trying to capture that by doing more and in finding things that they will be acknowledged in.
Right.
So if they have, this great image, well then how many attaboys, attagirl, pats on the back can you get from that? And it feels good in the moment. And money can only go so far though, right? You can only
Yeah.
buy so many things and do so many things, but there's still this emptiness of acknowledgement from whomever it was that you need it from that's not there.
Right. Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people are nodding along with that. And I think that also when you've got this high powered image, especially with women, you don't get the pats on the back because, well, she knows, right? She knows it's
Mhm.
good. She knows she's good. Look at her. She's got it all together. She doesn't need an
Mhm.
affirmation. And we, as much as we talk about internal validation, we do need some
Mhm.
external validation. We do need some
Mhm.
signposts that let us know we're valued by the people around us.
Mhm.
And you do hit a point sometimes in high power jobs where you're not. You realize you're not. You don't like the people you're working with. They don't like you.
Right.
Everybody's too burned out to even know what they like or don't like. And
Mhm.
that's when I think the doubt hits. And
Mhm.
some people try to staunch that wound, so to speak, by going on social media. And this is where your article kicks in. That's a
Right.
terrible idea because on social media, everything is an attack vector, right?
Oh, very much, very
That
much.
as bad as Twitter or whatever X is,
Mhm.
um, at least it's words. I go on
Mhm.
Instagram, I post an Instagram video about, some sort of motivation or some sort of concept. And the first comment will be some 14-year-old telling me I have a fat chin. So what do you do? Because social media is so essential for so many people's businesses. We have to do it. But how do we do
Mhm.
it and not lose our minds?
That's a really good question because I don't know that one size fits all on this question.
Right. Okay.
I think that one thing that does help is to limit your time on social media.
Hmm.
We have people that are spending 8 hours a day on social media. And I suppose if you're a social media manager, great, right, doing market research or whatever you need to do for your job. But for most people, if you're spending that much time on social media, I would question, what is it providing for you? Is it a distraction?
Right.
Okay, I understand that. Are you doing some type of market research? Is there something that you need to know? Or are you comparing yourself to others? Are there people out there that maybe you look up to that you're trying to be like, and you're trying to compare yourself to that person?
Okay, Wendy, hang on. This is probably a good place to take a break because social media tends to be a rabbit hole. And like you said, there's no one size fits all approach. So, anybody got a question, comment, suggestion, Leanna at Not Therapy Show or nottherapyshow.com, join mailing list at Not Therapy Show on X, Twitter, Instagram, Threads. We'll be back with Dr. Wendy Boring Bray, founder of Diversified Behavioral Health, talking imposter syndrome on It's Not Therapy. Back in a bit. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kirsner. I'm still not a therapist. I am still talking to a therapist. We're talking imposter syndrome, specifically about social media now and imposter syndrome. I'm here with Dr. Wendy Boring Bray of Diversified Behavioral Health. She's the founder of Diversified Behavioral Health. And before the break, we started pivoting to social media. And this is a series on why smart people do stupid things. And since I do YouTube, I've had something of a front row seat to seeing very smart, talented, good people just get into that spiral of influencer social media. And it's not healthy. And you've got kids, teenagers who are aspiring to be social media celebrities without having any idea of what a grind it is and what a toll it takes on your mental health.
Hmm.
Oh, the algorithm changed. I need to adapt to the
Oh,
algorithm.
yes.
I need to be streaming more instead of doing, prepackaged videos. It's got to be short. No, it's got to be long. No, there's got to be ad breaks.
Hmm.
It's a constant chase. You never,
Hmm.
it's like the greyhound that can never catch the rabbit. Being somebody, being important, being seen, it just becomes like this drug. And you're
No,
saying,
it really does.
yeah,
I mean, it really does. And we can look at brain studies that show that. It really
interesting.
does. It becomes, well, think about it like addiction. It's basically the same thought. When you get that far, same thing. The dopamine receptors in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
they're firing off. And when you receive a negative comment or even a positive comment, we have those receptors going off. And
Mm-hmm.
then we go right into fight or flight if it's a
Right.
negative comment. then we need to retaliate. If we don't, then what does that say about us? And
Right.
then how are other people going to see us?
Right.
Right.
That's
So
something I had
it
to learn the
is,
hard way. Yeah.
it's very much a spiral. And we can see that that was probably started in the beginning. It was fueled by anxiety and a lower self esteem or
Hmm.
self confidence,
Yeah.
which is what we can see in the workplace. Most people, they're ready. It's kind of set up that they're probably anxious. They're probably a perfectionist. Okay.
Hmm.
And this is how they're going to react. They probably have that lower self-esteem, lower confidence.
Right.
So why would they believe that they're doing a great job at something?
Right. Yeah, I found the idea of actually taking time off, like actual having downtime. I thought I was
Mhm.
taking downtime. I wasn't. And when I actually scheduled time of you are going to do nothing for
Mhm.
this amount of time, I had to start with like an hour and work
Right?
up. But I found such a huge difference in I was more focused when I was working, when I took time to not work. I got so run
Mhm.
down being always on. But that's part of the imposter syndrome, right? If you're not constantly working, then you're lazy. You're not doing 100%. We shouldn't be encouraging people to do 100%. That's not healthy.
No, it's not. And I
Yeah.
don't I don't know that I would contribute that as much to imposter syndrome as to anxiety.
Okay, okay. So it's just that it's not
Has a
you're working
deeper
all the
root.
time. Okay. And how much of imposter syndrome is just feeling anxious and the brain looking for it to go somewhere? Like it's a feeling in search of a reason.
It is. And I would say imposter syndrome is going to look different for different people.
Hmm.
So it may be that you have the feeling of, I'm not doing well at work, or I could do better at work
Hmm.
because my neighbor over in the next cubicle is doing amazing things. I want to be like them because I'm not even near what they're doing,
Right.
which may not be factual. It's really a feeling, may
Hmm.
not be factual. I mean, you could even be working on two totally different projects.
Right.
Some people will try to research all day long on the weekends. Let's say they're off on weekends. They're going to research all day long. How can I do this? How can I do that? Okay, well, if I just tweak this, if I just tweak that.
Right.
Other people that may have imposter syndrome may try just harder at work to get to know the person, or what are they doing, how are you doing this, and then go
Hmm.
back and think, okay, how can I make this happen? And it may not be, I guess, anxiety fueled to where it's working all weekend long.
Right.
So there's different levels, and it appears to different people. What I think a big part of it comes down to, okay, if you're already an anxious person, or you're already kind of have that low self-esteem,
Hmm.
what fuels you? Like, what do you do? There is probably a good chance that it's just not happening at work.
Yes.
There's probably a good chance it's happening somewhere else in your life as well.
I was going to ask how much of this is environmental expectations or social expectations. You were raised to believe it was never enough. There was the constant drumbeat, not necessarily in the family, certainly in school. We've had educators
Hmm.
come on talking about, I called it achievement addiction. It's all chasing grades, chasing grades. And unless
Hmm.
it's 100%, they get trained very, very young. Oh, if I don't ace this test, then I'm not going to get into a good school, and then I'm not going to get a good job, and I'm going to die penniless in the
Hmm.
street. It's this instant catastrophizing. How much of it is that deep that people are just trained to worry that way, and it just it gets applied to every aspect of their life in a different way.
I think that's huge. I
Yeah.
really think it's huge. And I also believe that this happened from the way, way back.
Mm-hmm.
From the way, way back. As soon as we started taking on greater roles at work,
Mm-hmm.
I think that we had greater expectations, and the bar is continually raised.
Yeah.
It's continually raised. So just when we look at school, let's just look at school and what you're talking to right now about the training.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. From kindergarten, we are trained, or even now, even sooner than, well, what is it, preschool, even before preschool, we have daycare, and parents are putting kids in daycares that have a very academic
Yeah.
format. So that way
Yeah.
they're prepared for pre K. And then, in kindergarten, I mean, we're looking at programs like, okay, now I want my child to learn Mandarin at
Yeah.
this young age. Parents may not know it, but that's great if the child knows it. We're going to have this bilingual child, so that way they will do better. Parents spend a lot of money to send kids to private schools so that way they can get into a better college.
Right.
So it really is started from a very young age. And as we talk just real quickly on this subject, kids are being burned out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Summers are no longer, hey, I have the summer free. Now it's like, okay, well, that's great that you're out of school. So you're going to take these classes.
Yeah.
You have to be better. You have to be better.
That like
And it's leading to a lot of problems. I mean, we're looking at in med schools right now, there's a very high rate of suicide.
yeah. Yeah.
You just can't keep moving the bar.
Yeah. I mean, those summers off as a kid, those were what helped me figure out
Hmm.
who I was and what I liked and what I wanted, that unstructured time where, I mean, much to my mother's chagrin, I discovered I really like snakes and bugs and playing in the mud.
Hmm.
My mother was
Yeah.
terrified of snakes, but that, I mean, that was me going, this is me. I like this. Nobody is laying a judgment on me. Not
Right.
having that, I can't imagine how revved people's nervous systems are before they even start work.
And take a child that's been raised in that environment, and then they graduate college,
Yeah.
working with individuals that are kind of, I see this a lot starting probably in 11th grade,
Mm-hmm.
especially at college. They don't know what they want to do with their life.
Yeah.
That pressure is on. Okay, a pressure is on. What will they do? We see a lot of anxiety and depression happen at that point because
Yep.
they've been told they have to do these great things, and okay, school's done, go do the great thing. And they don't really, they're not equipped. They're not, I mean, college
Mm-hmm.
gives us the foundation, but it doesn't give us all the blocks to create the great thing. That comes with work and knowledge. And so these poor people are like, they're hurting. And then let's flip it around. We look at employers that
Mm-hmm.
are expecting more and more and more,
Yes.
and they're contributing as well.
Yeah.
There's no space for people to be individual.
Yeah. Yeah.
There isn't. You need to meet whatever it is you have to meet.
And most people don't get jobs nowadays. They get it through connections. They get it through networking instead of just,
Hmm.
walking in off the street and having a great resume and acing the interview. It's all who you know as opposed to what you know. And I
Mm.
think that definitely lands people in a place that, well, they cheated to get the job
Mhm,
instead of, no,
mhm.
that's how you get jobs now. So what? Can you do the job or not? That that question isn't asked because, like you said, there's no space to be an individual. There's no opportunity at work to really get to know your coworkers, not as
Right.
competition or not because you're looking to climb the ladder, but just learn who they are as people.
Mhm.
So you can be more effective in communication. You can actually like the people you're working with.
Mhm.
Is that way people enter work part of it? Do you hear that in your practice?
I hear it more in larger corporations
Right.
than smaller ones. I think that smaller, more intimate businesses, they work a little bit harder on like company culture
It's true.
than your larger ones. You know, some of your larger corporations, oh, they kind of they throw you a bone like, hey, we're going to give you this. You know, we
Yeah.
might have a really cool gym, or we're going to pay for you to get a massage once a month or something.
Right.
But there isn't a sense of community, and
Right.
you don't have the opportunity to meet your coworkers aside from, hey, we have this meeting coming up. Did you get all your documents completed?
Right.
That's about the extent.
Yeah. So it sounds like loneliness is another underlying factor.
More so now since post COVID,
Okay.
and many corporations are still working remote.
Yeah.
So that is something else I've definitely seen where employees are trying to get out and meet people that either they work with or they
Mhm.
work in the same area. So shared workspaces.
Right, right. Wow, a lot. We really pulled this apart. Wendy, thank you so much. Wendy Boring
Mhm.
Bray, Doctor of Behavioral Health, licensed professional clinical counselor, founder of Diversified Behavioral Health. Wendy, if people want to learn more about what you do or learn more on these topics, how can they find you?
Oh, they can find me at my website at wendyboringbray.com. And it's boring, just like no fun, Boring, and then Bray, Bray. So they are more than welcome to find me there. And really, really quick, I do want to recommend one book for everybody that, has listened to this. It's called 4,000 Weeks Time Management for Mortals by Oliver Berkman. Excellent book. It is not on imposter syndrome, but a great way to just reevaluate your life.
That's a great title. Wendy, thank
It's
you
a
so
great
much.
book. Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
All right, we got to take our final commercial break of the show. When we come back, how to tell if you have imposter syndrome, if you're not sure, and what to do about it. Some tips. Because you guys know I don't leave you hanging. I give you a starting point. So stay tuned for that when we come back on It's Not Therapy. The following program is a peer-to-peer advice show and does not diagnose mental health conditions. If you're seeking social services, please call or text 211 or go to 211.ca. We're back on It's Not Therapy. I'm still Leanna Kirsner. I'm still not a therapist, and we are still talking imposter syndrome. And like I said before the break, we're going to do a little yes-no checklist to see, could you possibly have imposter syndrome? And then we're going to talk about what to do about it. Questions, comments, nottherapyshow.com, Leanna at nottherapyshow.com, Not Therapy Show on X/Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. Okay, so you may have imposter syndrome if you micromanage everything. You don't know how to delegate tasks. You obsess over little details that aren't central to the key task. You struggle with decision making. You have an intense fear of making mistakes or failing. We all have a fear of that, intense fear. You don't handle constructive criticism well. You feel stressed when you're not working. You believe success comes from innate or inherent ability, not hard work and luck. You feel like you need to accomplish everything on your own with no help from other people. You feel incompetent if you need help. You struggle to network and make friends in general. You feel like you have to constantly pursue training, certificates, credentials. You feel like a fraud despite having obvious expertise, and you procrastinate because you feel overwhelmed. These signs, if a bunch of them applied to you, congratulations, or I'm very sorry, you have imposter syndrome. Now, what to do? Top 10 phrase: self-esteem cannot exist without self-compassion. The perfectionism, the unreasonable expectations are not helping you. They're burning you out, and they're not allowing you to enjoy what you're good at and take pride in your work. So, step one, really take a good look at the expectations you're setting for yourself. Can you meet the goals? Are they tough but doable, or are they quite frankly impossible because either they're based on the expectations of other people, so they're things you can't control, so they're not healthy goals, or are they based on trying to be perfect, meaning focusing on your weaknesses instead of your strengths? Working on your weaknesses sometimes is good, but if you're not playing to your strengths the majority of the time, you're not living your best life. You're not doing your best work. Doing better is enough. You're not going to suddenly become perfect at working a room full of strangers, meeting people, hey, how you doing, approaching people without feeling like you're going to fall apart. That's not going to happen overnight. But if you can talk to one person, that's better than zero. If you can talk to 3 people, that's better than 1. You can achieve those goals and you can see the progress there. The nice thing about that networking is you will eventually develop a better support system. And that is so crucial to being more accurate, being more fair in your assessments of yourself. Sometimes it's really hard to get an accurate picture from the inside. So look for people who will tell you when you're wrong, but are more interested in building you up and not interested in tearing you down, because you are going to project more competence and confidence if you actually believe you're good at things. So don't be afraid to say, yeah, I may not be the best at this, but I'm good at this. And being good is enough, because perfect is a lie. Stop trying to be perfect. You're enough. You're enough. If you're still on a Barbie movie kick like I am. Either way, that's all the time I have for this. Next week, we got a great one. I'm going to have a rabbi come and talk to us about religion and how religion can make smart people do stupid things. It's the end of our series, though you could say every week's about why smart people do stupid things. But until then, I am Leanna Kirsner. I am not a therapist. I hope you find this helpful. And remember, your crazy is only a problem if it's hurting you. See you next week.